to just keep yourself under control. Well, the negotiation element of that is, look, who's going to care the next day? Not you. You're not going to care 2 days later. That's what you want, back to normal. The other thing I would say about hostile, difficult, or dangerous situations in general, you could add complex to that when you're negotiating. You never have a better strategy in a complex situation than the truth. That's especially true if you're dealing with someone who's paranoid and dangerous. First of all, a paranoid person is pretty damn good at sniffing out lies, because paranoid people are hyper observant. It's part of the clinical syndrome, actually. And if you give people enough attention heightening medication, amphetamines, they get paranoid. And so they're watching you like mad. And if you think you're going to get away with a lie, or even a quasi-lie, or even an avoidant act with someone who's paranoid, you have another thing coming. If they're very instrumental, they want your wallet, I would give them your wallet again and let them get the hell away from you. It's not an act of cowardice. If you're always kowtowing to other people and avoiding things, you're a coward. But if you're engaged in an encounter with someone utterly unpredictable, who's a stranger, who's likely to damage you, especially if they're armed, or the price you have to pay to walk away with your life unscathed is a monetary loss, don't think twice about it, just do it. You tell the person, I'm going to do exactly what you say. But again, you have to do that without any hint of lying. And hopefully you also satisfy their idiot need for dominance in that situation too, for what it's worth. I wouldn't recommend that strategy of radical obedience in any situation you have to repeat in some iterative manner, and frequently. Kowtowing to an abusive boss isn't helpful. Kowtowing to an abusive spouse isn't helpful. I'm not saying that's simple or that you should adopt an immediately confrontational stance, but mere obedience isn't going to free you from that conundrum. With the paranoid and dangerous person, part of what makes people insane is that other people lie to them. Now, they might lie to themselves too and add to that, and they might lie to other people and add to their insanity, but a lot of people are driven insane by having been lied to. Most people who are beat up by drunk, hostile bullies have done something foolish and unwise and provocative in the run-up to the beating. Not always, often. I remember I went out one night in Montreal with my neighbor and landlord, who was an ex-Hells Angels biker, French-Canadian working-class guy. And French-Canadian have a rough working-class culture. And he was definitely one of the rougher members of that culture. And he spoke Joual French, which is the kind of the slangy working-class French. We got along pretty well, even though I couldn't really speak his language and he couldn't really speak mine. And we partly got along well. He had been an alcoholic and he was in prison. He'd been in prison for quite a while and had got out. And he was trying to go straight and be sober and was having real difficulty with that. We had dinner together one night and he invited me at one point out to go to his hangouts with him. He wanted to take me for a ride on his motorcycle, and he put me on his motorbike with his wife's helmet on, and it was like 6 sizes too small for me, so it was just basically sitting perched on top of my head like a turban. And he said, when we jumped on, in his rough French, if the cops try to stop me, I ain't stopping, just so you know. So, all right, man, away we go. And it was a powerful machine, and we went down into the working class Montreal bar neighborhood, and he probably got in 5 fights that night. I mean, he won all of them. I don't know why you would ever want to get to a fight with this guy. You just had to look at him and know that that was a bad idea. But everybody who he fought with did the same stupid thing. It was some, uncarved block, dopey young guy who was trying to look tough, and then he'd say something stupid, and my landlord would look at him, which should have been enough, and the look was, do you want to say something stupid again, or are you smart enough to shut up? And usually the answer was, I'd like to say something stupid again if you don't mind. And then, he'd get pounded. And so this character was dangerous, but he wasn't without his rules. Don't muck about and we won't have any trouble. And a lot of rough guys are like that, They're actually pretty good judges of character. Now, they tend to be a little on the cynical and skeptical side. That goes along with being highly disagreeable, but they'll poke you a bit. Like, I wasn't my landlord's equal in his bar. That was his territory. He came to my door several nights, extremely intoxicated, 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and we talked about his binges, and I knew binge drinkers. I studied alcoholism for my PhD, and I knew plenty of binge drinking alcoholics from northern Alberta. A lot of them were my friends, and he could drink like 80 beer. And you think no one can. It's like, yeah, that shows what you know. I had research subjects whose fathers polished off 40 ounces of vodka a day, every day for 30 years. So, people can drink a lot more than you think. And my landlord was one of those guys who could drink till, normal person would have been dead, and he'd be basically unconscious standing up. And then he'd run out of money. This is like 2 days into the binge. And he'd come to the door 3 a.m. after howling at the moon with his little dog outside, come to the door with a toaster, a microwave in hand, standing there, wobbling, red-eyed, barely conscious. Jordan, do you want to buy my microwave? $50, $20. And, it's not that easy to negotiate with a unbelievably inebriated, somewhat hungover and desperate ex-Hell's Angel biker in another language at 3 a.m. This happened several times, and the first few times I just bought it and I'd give it back to him, the next day or 2 days later. But he was coming over with some degree of regularity, and he was kind of scaring my wife. Now, he didn't scare my wife on purpose, and it's not like she's an easily frightened person, but it was disruptive because having something like that happen at 3 a.m, it brings an element of instability into your evening, but she also said, and this was her primary concern, that it wasn't good for him. We knew he was trying to quit drinking. She said, look, you're just enabling his drinking. And I thought, yeah, that's probably right, but how am I going to explain it to him? So he showed up at 3 a.m. and knocked, and he was standing there, microwave in hand. I remember this quite vividly. He says, Jordan, do you want to buy my microwave? $20. I said, look, I know you're trying to quit drinking, and I know that if I buy this from you, you're going to continue, and that you've been drinking. You're just going to continue drinking tonight. And I've talked this over with Tammy, and we've decided that, we've been getting along with you pretty well, and it's not your best interest to do this anymore. I looked at him while I was saying it, and I felt out my words, because that's another thing you can do when you're negotiating. It's like, is this a solid word? Is this a solid word? Are you puffing yourself up? Are you playing morally superior? Are you judgmental? Are you now his father? Are you shaking your finger? and never getting it. So the most difficult negotiations I've had, I would say, the most emotionally challenging were a combination of complex dual relationships and then transformation across time. So a dual relationship conflict is one where you have, let's say, a business relationship with someone and a personal relationship with someone. Now, I have a business that involves the dissemination of online personality tests and psychological interventions that help people plan. Now, I developed those with two of my psychological colleagues, my former supervisor and a student of mine. Now, I knew my supervisor extremely well, and I knew my student extremely well, but they didn't know each other that well. I developed the concepts with all three of them, and the technology with my student, and I did a lot of the sales and marketing with my supervisor as well. Bob Peel had more business connections than I did. Not a lot, but more. Some is a lot more than none. And Daniel, at that point, had no business connections at all, but a lot of technical expertise. And so Bob and I were the major partners in the enterprise, and that's how it was structured financially as well. And Daniel was the junior partner. But as our relationship continued across time, of course, Daniel finished his PhD and worked more and more intently on building and maintaining our online tools and expanding their distribution and making sure all the technology underneath functioned, because he knew everything about every stage of technology. And that became more and more sophisticated, of course, as the internet developed. So Daniel's role slowly grew and Bob's role slowly shrank. Now, the problem with that was that made our original arrangement incrementally less fair. And so there was an injustice in that was emerging, but there was also an impracticality. So the injustice was we were no longer being rewarded in accordance with our contribution, our ongoing contribution. There was past contribution and past risk, including financial risk, but it was also compromising sustainability, because Daniel wasn't being rewarded effectively enough to keep him optimally motivated. This was hard to sort out, because it was hard to figure out exactly when the unfairness started to emerge. And then it was also difficult. So imagine that you have a partner who puts in a fair bit of money, we'll say $250,000 into an enterprise, and then spends part-time for 5 years trying to build it. And that's successful enough to keep it iterating. And, he's offering other contributions that keep it cobbled together while you're struggling to develop a large enough clientele to be successful. And then you are a little successful, and it's a few years later. Well, how do you calibrate the value of that initial investment? We actually sort of sidestepped that discussion, because the fundamental problem was it didn't look like our current arrangement was optimally played. The value of his initial investment compared to the current value of his contribution. And we had to do this in good faith without any grandstanding or temper tantrums. And it was rough, because also I knew Bob really well, and I knew Daniel really well, but Daniel and Bob didn't know each other as well, so there wasn't the same degree of trust, although they were honorable and courageously trusting people, so I felt I was caught in the middle. Why did it work? Because the three of us knew what we wanted. We wanted to make these online tools available to people to help them. We wanted to make a reasonable amount of money while doing it, and we knew we were wise enough, all of us, to know that if we didn't hash out a deal that we were all thrilled with, it wasn't going to work. We've had a business partnership now for, it's got to be damn near 30 years. And so that's definitely the sign of successful negotiation, because a lot of things change over 30 years. The other thing I learned from that too is you make sure you write down your damn negotiations all the time, and make sure you have a record of the fundamental details, because you will forget and there'll be ambiguity, and then you'll start arguing about what you remember about what the negotiation was. That does not make for a harmonious long-term relationship. Another practical reflection. I used to help my junior faculty colleagues who were just entering the professoriate negotiate with the university for their lab startup grant. So when you start as a professor, a research professor, you're going to need some money, seed money it's called, to get your lab up and running. And the difference in the amounts of money awarded to different labs is large. It's not standard, partly because some science is more expensive than others. And so there was no rule about what a good startup grant was. And it's pretty boneheaded just to ask the dean, I need $350,000. Because his proper response to that is, I'll give you 100. That's very unsophisticated. Here's a way to get what you need for your startup. Make a 3-page list of the equipment you need and every expense detailed down to the level of $1,000. And then give him that and say, this is what I need. And if he says, no, you need half of that, you say, well, you figure out which parts of that to cross off. And then his answer is going to be, well, I don't know what you do. And your answer is going to be, yeah, I do. And that's why you hired me. And that's how much money I need to get going. And if you want me to do a good job, then that's the amount I need. And all of that should be true, by the way. And then you should negotiate hard for that, because devil's in the details. And if you have a detailed description of why it is that you need and want these specific things, man, it's hard to counter that. And that doesn't mean you win, right? Because you're not trying to win a negotiation. You're trying to set it up so everyone's thrilled about it. That's the win. At that level of hyper detail, it's very difficult to counter you. This is what I need in order for this to work. And if that's a lie, you shouldn't be telling it. You know, you shouldn't say, well, I want $250,000 salary. You don't negotiate with a lie. You say, look, I thought this through and I want to be maximally motivated when I start here, like in every way. I want a solid high market rate with some room for expansion. I want to come to work 100% committed to the project. Here's what would do that for me. Generally speaking, that's a great pathway to success. And you start out in the right foot. You also really increase the probability that the people you're negotiating with are going to have some respect for you, because you've demonstrated right off the bat that you're not someone who is trifling or to be trifled with. And man, when you first meet someone, they make a first impression, eh? And the last little bits of interaction you have with them sort of cement your memory. The first thing that happens and the last thing that happens in any sequence of events are the most important for framing your concept and memory of the event. So when you first meet someone, they establish their low resolution image of you. And it's very hard to alter that damn thing once it's there. If you do that effectively, now you've also got off on the right foot. And that's a good deal, man. You set yourself up for success that way. Even if you make a mistake or two the first weeks, they'll think, that really smart young guy made a couple of mistakes, instead of thinking that dismal loser did a few things right. A successful negotiation right at the beginning establishes you as the competent person they hoped you were when they hired you. It's also worth grappling in those initial negotiations, because you actually make your boss happier. You know, because the last thing he wants to see, if he has any sense at all, is that he hired some dimwit over whose eyes wool can be easily pulled and who will work for a below market rate. It's like, oh, great, you know, you hired another one of those 6 out of 10 guys that are just gonna sink you. You know, if by contrast you reveal yourself to be a bit of a firebrand who bargains fairly and productively, but forthrightly, any boss with any sense is going to walk away from that thinking, yeah, you know, hey, maybe I actually got someone here that's worth having around. So the answer to the question, why do I have to negotiate, is that the alternatives are to use force on others or just to comply with what people request from you. And those are bad short, medium, and long-term strategies. So you negotiate because that's the best of a bad lot. And then you might ask, well, what's the aim of the negotiation?
I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past. And the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior, you know I'll always be a bit superior. Get off of me, this ain't no humble brag. I want you to hear words, you can say them back. I want you to feel free from the chains at last, and to believe in what you got, it was built to last, yeah.
Now that I've been put through hell, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Gonna learn the consequence of being incompetent. Mental health is confidence, dreams and some modestness. I'm not here to save the day, that's for you to take away. I could play a million mind games, but instead I say something not illogical, something that is topical. Rub it on and watch it go, make yourself unstoppable. Dreams are irresponsible, but they're always possible. If you just believe, you could be so remarkable.
Thoughts in my head, a collage and they spread. I'll be great one day, going off of my meds. No, I'm not giving up, no, I'm not giving in. I will make it to the top, taking off in the wind. I gotta make it, I'm saving every day to taste it. I'm patient, but my mind, it can hardly take it. I'm chasing a dream that I've had for several ages. A vacant, modern kingdom for the taking.
Now that I've been put through hell, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no, I don't take shit.
With some consideration to how you negotiate with yourself. And you might say, well, I can just do what I want. I don't have to negotiate with myself. And first of all, well, no, you can't just do what you want, because no one can. And also, you won't even do what you tell yourself to do. right? Think about that for a bit. Other people won't do what you tell them to do. Your wife certainly won't do what you tell her to do, not for any length of time. But you won't even do it. We're so resistant to arbitrary tyranny as human beings that we can't even tell ourselves what to do. Now, what you can do is offer yourself a good, genuine deal. One of the ways you can find out if you offered yourself a good deal is whether or not you carry through on it. You know, you might say, well, I'm going to give up cheesecake and I'm going to hit the gym 3 times a week for 2 hours. And in 3 months, I'll be Joe Six-Pack, you know, the women will be all over me, and you don't do it. That's because it's a bullshit deal. You didn't think it through. It's not a good deal. You didn't negotiate with yourself. How do you negotiate with yourself? It's actually kind of a modified form of prayer. There's this injunction in the New Testament, this idea that if you knock, the door will open, and if you ask, you will receive, and if you seek, you will find. And what does that mean? It means that the person on the other side of the door isn't going to answer unless they hear the knock. So you have to make the effort. And one of the efforts you have to make, if you want to negotiate with yourself, is you have to ask yourself what the hell you want. Actually, as a question. So you need to be kind of desperate. You have to think, Jesus, I'm kind of miserable. I don't have what I want. I don't have what I need. I'm not happy. I'm anxious. I'm kind of hopeless. Maybe I'm nihilistic, sort of paralyzed into inactivity, depressed. What the hell do I want? There has to be a kind of desperation in that, so that's a real question. And then you have to allow the answer to reveal itself. It's a prayer for revelation. Say, well, what hypothetically would make me happy? You know, well, maybe I'd want to have someone who loved me. Then you kind of have to think about what that would look like. And you can think of that with a fantasy. That's a thought. That's a revelation, that daydream. And then you can ask yourself those sorts of questions on all sorts of fronts. You know, maybe you're 17 and you're getting old enough so that you can contemplate yourself out a couple of years in the future. What would I like my life to be like? Who would I want to be like? Well, maybe I'd like, let's see, you're 17. Well, if you have any sense and you're not completely addled by the environmental apocalypse mongers, you probably want a car. At least you do if you're male. Maybe you do if you're female. Maybe you want to have an independent job. Be making your own money. Maybe you want to have your own apartment. Maybe you want to have an apartment with some roommates. Maybe you want to be in community college. Maybe you want to be picking up a trade. It's like, if you could have what you wanted, what would it be? You have to ask yourself that question like someone who cared whether you lived or died. It's hard to put yourself in that state of mind, but it's possible. I don't really like basement apartments, but maybe I could start with a basement apartment. And maybe that'd be better than living at home. And maybe I could afford better more than a basement apartment if I had a roommate or two. And then you might think, well, where would I like to live then? If I could, well, it's like I would say, well, live on a hill and not in a valley. That works better. You know, maybe it doesn't have to be too big, but might have a little bit of style. Maybe I want to be kind of close to downtown. I don't know what the hell you want. You have to figure that out, but you could throw some possibilities around in your mind. That's fantasy and daydream, you know, which we try to stomp out of kids so they can attend to whatever idiot social justice nonsense propaganda that's being rammed down their throats. This capacity for fantasy and daydream, that's thought, boys and girls. So you want to fantasize about what you could have and who you could be. And you want to feel that out and think, geez, you know, if I could have that, I might be willing to get out of bed in the morning. I might be excited to get out of bed in the morning. Even better, you know. I might even be excited to get out of bed in the morning, even if other things in my life weren't 100% right. That's even better. I might be excited to get out of the bed in the morning, even if things in my life were difficult. Now you're getting somewhere, man. You got a reason to get out of bed, even when things are going to be difficult. You're starting to develop a bit of a vision. Then you think, well, if that's what I want an apartment. I want 3 roommates. Okay, now you can start fragmenting it. How much is the apartment going to cost? How are you going to find your roommates? What do you want your roommates to be like? How much money do you have to make in order to afford that? Now you're starting to make a plan. And if the goal is worthwhile, you got your apartment, that's a sub-goal of a greater goal, being more mature, let's say. Well, now you can start laying out a strategy, and it's possible that you'll abide by it, right? You've conducted a successful negotiation with yourself, you'll abide by your own decisions. And if you find yourself faltering a bit, then I would say either reevaluate your goal, do that carefully, or make the steps from where you are now to the goal somewhat smaller. You have to mess with the parameters a bit to see how you can modify what you're doing so that you're likely to stick to it. You have to adopt a stance of radical ignorance first. There's a humility, which is I don't have what I need and want. That's humility. Faith, but maybe I could get it if I made the right sacrifices. That's faith. A little discipline to put it into action, and then you're on your way. And then you're starting to develop yourself into someone who other people could negotiate with too. Like, this isn't some little skill that you need to develop because it'll be good while the rest of your life progresses. Like, if you can't negotiate, you're not getting anywhere. How do you know when you've brought any given negotiation to a successful close? Well, one obvious rule is that everyone is satisfied. You're done, and it's been successful, and everyone... But that's kind of pie in the sky. It's like everyone was always thrilled. It's like, no, obviously not. But so you need kind of an intermediate rule, which is unless you can come up with a better solution than the one that's on the table, then shut up. It's like, oh, I'm not happy with that. It's like, fair enough. You're not happy with it. Do you have a suggestion that we can negotiate through? Well, no, I don't really know how we could make what we're doing any better. It's like, well, unless you can figure out how, we don't know either. So there are situations in which the best you can imagine is as good as it's going to get. That doesn't mean that, you're thrilled to your core in a paradisal way with every detail of the negotiation. Maybe you can improve it incrementally as you get wiser and the process continues. But at some point you think, well, there are a multitude of interests that have to be brought into harmony here, and we have limited creative ability because there's a limited number of us. We're offering this arrangement as a potential solution, and it's viable in that it'll work. And if we can't jointly imagine anything better, that's the best we can do. And then under that circumstance, wisdom is being thrilled with the best that you can do. And that's also a good thing to do for yourself too. It's like there's going to be a limit to your creative capacity in a negotiation, and as good as you can do, that has to be enough. You have to figure out how to make that not only acceptable to you, but at minimum good enough. You need to learn how to do this. Slave, tyrant, or negotiator. Those are your pathways. And I wouldn't recommend the first two. And you can get really, really good at the last one. Then you get what you need and want, and everyone around you thrives, right? Your partner is thrilled to be with you. Your family, your kids thrive. You have friends, they're happy to be around you. You're a benefit to your community. Your life expands. More opportunities come your way, right? You're heading for the right end of the Pareto distribution. And you get there through negotiation with yourself and with other people. If you really get good at it, you start looking forward to them. You stop really thinking of them even as negotiations. You start thinking about them as opportunities to do interesting things with other